Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and this one's going to be a mouthful. Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals, Eve of Judgment, issue number 1, acronymed A.X.E, Eve of Judgment. Why not just A.X.E? I don't know. Anyway, this is a number 1, but it's baloney. Don't pay attention to that because it's technically a prequel. After this will come A.X.E Judgment Day, as opposed to Eve of Judgment. It'll be Judgment Day, number 1, and so 2 number 1s in a row. After that, you got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books coming out in August, all based off of this oh crap, no, they're not really going to do this. Every single one of the X-Men. Do you guys remember Sword? Do you remember the X-Men, after the Hoxpox stuff, they did, this was a sword, the swords thing, right? The Age of Swords, or the Dingleberry of Swords, X of Swords, 10 of Swords, that thing. That's what it was. I knew eventually I would get there. The Dingleberries is what did it for me. Yeah, and they crossed over every single one of the X books instead of just the main line. So if you wanted to read an X-Men book, it had to involve these things, and you have to buy all of them to really understand everything. And this is why Marvel is going down the tube, because when the X-Men aren't popular, Marvel is crap. Let's just face it. And this actually breaks my heart. Damn it. I came into this really hopeful, and I only just now paid attention to this stuff here. You're seeing a real-time reaction right now, dude. Wow, that's painful. It's going to be like 11 or 12, looks like 12 books coming out in September, all about this stuff. And then in October, there's 35,000. In November will be A.X.E Judgment Day Omega, issue number 1. So the last book will be called number 1 also. Don't you love how Marvel does that? Anyway, guys, before I start completely tearing this apart, because I have a feeling that's where this is going to go now, I'm going to tell you the good things also. Let me just tell you who made the comic book. So the writer is Kieran Gillen. The artist is Pascal Ferry. Color art by Dean White. And letters and design by VC's Clayton Cowles. Now, here's something. The cover artists, there are several, Carlos Pacheco, Rafael Fonteres, and Rachel Rosenberg. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variant covers as I can see it. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the Avengers and the X-Men, and Jack Kirby alone is responsible for the Eternals. I'll try to remember to explain why the Eternals came about and this, that, and the other thing and all this other stuff later, if I remember. If not, I've done it in other videos also. So first, let's just get into the comic book itself. The art. The art is very simple to get through the art. Really good art. Okay? The colors on here, first off, we're bouncing around to different areas, right? There's Olympia, there's Lemuria, and they're all the shadow realms or side realms or this realm or that realm or whatever realm. There's all these different realms that there's a pocket dimension where the Eternals are in. Sometimes I feel like the Eternals should just stay in that damn pocket realm. You know what I'm saying? And never come out again. Seal the doors, shut it closed, right? But with all the various realms that they're in, they're all colored differently. They're drawn differently as well. You know what I'm saying? But it's not as noticeable as the colors, right? The art has its own really great aspects. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But as far as the colors, it really, one, color, of course, sets the mood, right? But two, it's really going to give you the sense that it's a different place, a different location. It's not just, oh, Lemuria, look, there are bubbles because it's water. Duh. No, it's more than that. The designs are different. The shapes are different, right? The architecture in and of itself. They're different people who created these areas, so of course they should all look differently. And only someone with a very astute mind would be able to recognize that. Just recognize it alone, at least off actually draw it and make us see something different and color it. I'm specifically talking about the colors here. The inks, there's nothing great about the inks. They're really just used as another version of the colors. You know what I'm saying? The artist kind of doing their own version of colors for the most part with black. So I'm not particularly impressed with the inks. The line work, however, Fontieres, I think it was, whatever. I like how there's a lot of very sharp, angular lines in this. Why? Because that's a lot of what Kirby did. Every so often there'll be a sphere in the middle of very acute, isometric, you know, right, all the different kinds of angles that you could possibly have, and the very straight lines, all going somewhere but not really meaning anything, just giving a big, you know, people talk about word salads. I feel like I'm getting into a word salad now, but when Jack Kirby would draw something, you would see 1,000 lines and you would have no idea what any of them means, but they were just done so well. I'd say the only person who was ever able to come even close to that would be Walter Simonson, which is one of the reasons why so many people don't understand his art. But the people who do, they're just like, no, this is literally what comic book art is supposed to be. You know, this is very different from those, but there's still the respect of what they had. Whenever you're seeing Eternals and the Eternals backgrounds and where they live, or just the idea that Eternals are there in the first place, there's almost consistently very sharp angles, lines that are just too straight, right? The colors help to give that burst of life to it, but having that nostalgic feeling of Kirby doing the artwork again, really good. Let's get on with the story itself. The plot is fantastic on this. It doesn't mean the story is going to be any good. You know, the storytelling is going to be any good, but there's a really great plot here. Kieran Gillen, I think, has been designed by God, right, to be one of the perfect Dungeons and Dragons players and or DMs, right? You think about the line of work that Kieran has done before, and it's just consistently boom, boom, boom. The problem with that when it comes to comic books is that they're very visual. If you don't have a good artist, you're screwed, but we've already eliminated that process. The idea here is that with the kind of storytelling that Kieran does, however you pronounce, I think Kieran is a guy. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I feel like with Kieran, if I were one of his players, I would think this guy is the greatest ever. But actually reading the stories where some of the decisions don't seem to make sense, I'm not sitting at the table while someone's talking out of character in a Dungeons and Dragons game or a Marvel Face Rip game or GURPS or whatever somebody's playing. I'm not there to see the out of character behind the screen stuff where a player's like, you know, DM says, okay, so this happens, what do you do? And somebody says, oh, well, describe such and such. Okay, well, do. Okay, well, what's everybody else doing? Okay, da-da-da-da. Okay, well, I'm going to, I think that they're going to do this, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so you see the logic and the reasoning behind it. Unfortunately, Kieran doesn't seem to possess the ability yet. Maybe one day, maybe Kieran will see this review and suddenly realize, oh, this is something I can actually use. And maybe not. I don't know. I don't put that much value in the things that I say here. I feel like Kieran could use to better explain why a character is doing what they're doing, as opposed to just the idea that they're doing it. Because this plot is incredible. Look, at the end of you know what? I'm going to read you the plot. It's all the way at the back of the book. It says, next, right, the next issue, the X-Men claim they're the planet's new gods. The Eternals know that position is already filled. The Avengers are about to realize exactly how many secrets their so-called friends, the X-Men, have kept from them. Years of tension lead to a volcanic eruption as two worlds burn. So I guess that's the Avengers and the X-Men, or the mortal world and the Eternals world. Who has leaked the X-Men's secrets to their latest foes? Why is Tony Stark abducting an old friend? Really? Okay. And who stands in judgment over the whole world? That's an incredible plot, because we've known that, especially ever since Hickman left, there's all this crazy stuff that's just been left undone. It's been left untouched, right? At one point in here, you see that, I don't want to give too much away, so I'll try and save it towards the end of the review. But there are things that happen in here that remind you of things that Jonathan Hickman, the guy who started doing the Hoxpox stuff, the Halls of X-Men. I don't remember what the hell they're called right now. It's been so long ago. It's been so long since I've been reading them. It's been so long since it's been good. like consistently, oh my God, mind-numbingly amazing, right? There's mind-numbing and then there's mind-popping, mind exploding, right? My mind doesn't explode for the stuff nowadays. I'm lucky if I feel happy and exuberant, if I see someone just like, oh, hey, that was pretty cool in a comic book nowadays. I'm just not, it doesn't do anything for me anymore for the most part. There's so much that Hickman was going to do that he just kind of abandoned and said somebody else can figure this stuff out. Case in point, who the great betrayer was or is going to be. Because remember, the Hoxpox stuff, when the mutants they can't die anymore. If they do, they just come right back. Death is meaningless at this point, right? We'll even take away the pain of your death, right? No, in this particular case, we literally have it so that, hey, this storyline was going to pop off and Hickman didn't finish it because he decided to just quit because too much interference. You don't interfere with the Hickman, right? You just don't do that. Maybe some of the stuff you're not going to understand. Maybe some of the stuff the editors didn't understand. But at the end of the day, the man has had so many incredible hits that with his large stories, you just kind of sit back and say, I'll let him go. Jim Shooter, who has given us the greatest decade of comics that we've seen since they were created by Kirby, Ditko, and Stan Lee himself, right? Jim Shooter himself said, hey man, Walter Simonson is just one of those guys where he's a big gun that you can aim, but you can't decide what he shoots at or when he shoots or if he shoots. You just got to let him go. And during that time, what is arguably the greatest run in any comic book ever was created, and that's Walter Simonson's run on Thor, right? Where Jason Aaron blatantly stole from and in many ways made worse, But it is what it is. Hey, Donny Cates didn't help with that either. Love Donny Cates to death, but Donny needs to have a little head out of butt moment. Let's get back to Kieran. Kieran is, to me, he's just one of those once-in-a-lifetime's Dungeons & Dragons storytellers that, a judge who will, a DM, a dungeon master, who will give this incredible story that when you're playing it, you'll never forget it. And if somebody says, hey, you want to play Dungeons & Dragons? Yeah, it sounds good. Oh, man, yeah. Remember I used to play, I had this one DM, and Kieran Gillen is the DM that you talk about. That's who I feel Kieran is. But in him telling the story afterwards, he just doesn't have the writing. And this is the difference between a good storyteller and a good writer. You can be a great writer and a horrible storyteller. You're usually the ghost writer. You're usually the guy who's taking someone else's story and you're actually putting it into words. You know what I'm saying? That would be my situation where I feel like I'm an incredible storyteller, but actually putting them down into words and, as opposed to telling the story and getting the crowd interaction and whatnot, you know what I'm saying? I don't feel like I have a great ability at doing the actual writing of my stories. But I've never told a story to someone where somebody hasn't just been like, dude, mind blown, So there's that. And there are people like me who just really great storytellers, but you just can't seem to put them into words. Kieran, I feel, is in a very similar predicament. I got so bored with his Eternals story. I'm not the only one either, clearly, evidently, demonstrably. In fact, let me demonstrate that right now. And this is the thing that's really damning about this. So the first issue of his Eternals, which is Eternals Volume 5, which the cover date is March of 2021, but it was released on January 6th, 2021. So the beginning of 2021. We can't blame COVID for, any bad problems. Why? Because, well, let's just look at the rankings, and I'm using ICV2 top 20 comic books for January 2021. Number 1, Dark Knight's Death Metal, issue number 7 of 7. That was a conclusion of a wild storyline for DC. That was Zack Snyder. I remember Scott Snyder. I remember it very well. I remember to correct myself. Future State, the next Batman, issue number 1 of 4. There was high hopes for that one. Star Wars, The High Republic, issue number 1. Holy crap! Right, all these number 1s. And then number 4, bestseller for the month of January in 2021 was Eternals #1. That was the 4th best seller. Eternals issue #1. Like, that's the state. Everything else in here is King in Black issue #3. That's Donny Cates. Future State Wonder Woman, another #1 of 2. Wonder Woman doesn't sell. Her merch sells. Her comic books don't. What do you call it? Venom #32. Again, Donny Cates. Hello, one of the greatest writers, probably the greatest writer of our time. Not consistently, but nonetheless, one of the best storytellers. Thor #11. Wasn't that also Donny Cates at the time? No, actually it wasn't. I think Thor #11, I think that was, maybe that was him. Shoot, maybe it was Donny. If not, it was Aaron. Anyway, it could have been Aaron. Could it have been? Anyway, whatever. Boom. That was #9. #8, however, Future State, Dark Detective #1, right? All these issue #1s coming out, right? And then finally, #11, issue #56 of Amazing Spider-Man, which is one of the consistent bestsellers no matter what. Oh, Immortal Hulk #42. Al Ewing, one of the best, if not the best run on the Hulk ever. And that was #18, right? King in Black was down there. A Gwenom versus Carnage, which didn't even have Carnage in it. #1, that was #19. X-Men #17 was #20, right? Just to give you an idea. Eternals #1 was #4. The final issue of the Eternals was issue #12, I think. Let me see. Let me go back over here. Bing, yes, issue #12. Volume 5 of Eternals, issue #12, Kieran Gillen. Actually, the final issue was released on the 18th of May, so just a month and a half ago? 2 months ago. Almost 2 months ago, right? Cover date of July 2022, but release date of May 18th, 2022. That's issue #12, the final issue. It all ends here, except it doesn't, because it continues in this issue that I'm reviewing right now. Let me see what that issue #12 did as far as the top 50 comics are concerned. #1, Amazing Spider-Man #1. This is just, sorry, so this is May of 2022. So that's last month. Excuse me, that's 2 months ago. That's the most recent that I have. But that's also when issue #12 of Eternals came out, May. Amazing Spider-Man #1 was #1. #2, Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, issue #1. The television series was getting ready to come out at that time. Thor, Hulk versus Thor Banner War Alpha #1. So it's a #1 and it's Donny Cates, right? After that, some twig, whatever the hell that is, from Image comic books. Cool. Moon Knight, Black, White, and Blood, issue #1 of 4, which I reviewed. Batman, who doesn't like Batman? Thor #25, Donny Cates again, right? Flashpoint, a #1, Flashpoint Beyond. Spider-Man 2099, Exodus, issue Alpha, so issue #1, boom. X-Men #11, we're up there, you know. Spider-Man #2, Amazing Spider-Man #2, right? Hulk #7, Donny Cates. Donny Cates on Immortal, oh no, somebody else on Immortal X-Men #2, right? X-Men, High, Grimm #1, Captain America Symbol of Truth #1, all these #1s, right? The final issue, oh shoot, that came out 2 months ago, of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, 5 of 5, crap, I haven't read that yet. Moon Knight #11, Jed McKay coming up in the ranks, right? Justice League #1, all these #1s, they're always the top tier, right? But this is not the top 20, this is the top 50, like I said. And guess where #12 of Eternals ranks on that? Trick question. It doesn't even rank. It does not even rank on the top 50 of sales. Saga. Where did I just see that? King Spawn #10. Star Wars #23. Wolverine 21. X-Men Red #2. Nightwing #93. All these are on there. The final one, the #50 is Thor #24. Right? Which, yeah, that would have been Donny Cates then. Excuse me. Berserker #8 of 12. And it's a mature rating also. X-Force #28. That's #48 on this list. #47. What If, Miles Morales, which sucked. Avengers Forever. Batman Beyond Neo Year. House of Slaughter by Boom Studios. You know, and it's issue #6 at that. Punisher #3. All these things, like, and it doesn't even rank on the top 50. So as it stands, Eternals, you're going to have a hard time convincing anybody that this stuff is going to be any good. Like, good luck convincing anybody that they're going to want to buy this stuff. But now you're talking about an entire... So now you're going to base an entire event off of the Eternals, but you're also going to include the Avengers and the X-Men, and that's what Marvel is hoping for. That's what Kieran Gillian is... How do you pronounce his name? Their name. They're hoping that they're banking on the X-Men and possibly the Avengers boosting up their sales. I would love to see in 2 months what the numbers are, what the figures are for the best selling of the month. I'm sure this will come up fairly high for a prequel with the number 1 stamped on it, right? I'm sure. Honestly, the only reason why I even looked at this, because I saw Eternals, I'm like, I don't think I'm interested in this. I saw Eternals on the cover. I'm like, dude, I don't want to do this. I really don't, but I know that people are going to want to know what's up. So I better check it out. The plot to me is fantastic. Guys, in the story, the idea is that, and I've said this so many times, that the X-Men are mutants, which is a basis off of mutation, which, if you look at Jack Kirby's stories for the Eternals, hey, the Eternals are when the Celestials came down, they said that the Eternals, they're making the Eternals the peak of human perfection. The regular humans are just, bottom of the rung, primordial, and eventually they can evolve. They'll have the ability to evolve, and eventually they will become more powerful than the Eternals, right? Or at least they have the potential, right? Human beings are all about potential. And then you have the deviants, which is the opposite extreme of the Eternals. Here's perfection of the human being. Here's the ultimate or the extreme of mutation over here, right? So that was Jack Kirby's idea for continuing. For the sake of conversation, he only made the Eternals because when he was in Marvel, he wanted to do the new gods in Marvel. That was his idea, but he wanted to kill all of the gods in the Marvel universe, right? That would have meant killing Hercules and the Olympian gods. That would have included killing one of the best sellers they had at the time, Thor, right? Thor and all of the Asgardians. Or we're going to send them into Ragnarok, right? Now, Stan Lee would have thought about the idea of, eventually they can come back from their Ragnarok, which later on other writers have thought up that idea. What do you call it? Was it Straczynski? I think it was Straczynski who first, I think it was him who first came up with that idea, that they can actually come back. They can be resurrected. That's when Loki came back as a female, and great storytelling that was. I loved it. If you got good storytelling, I will read whatever you put in front of me. You know what I'm saying? I don't care about agendas. Actually, just don't come at me with agenda. Make sure that your agenda is really good storytelling. Then I don't care what you do in your story. As long as it's good, that's all that matters to me, It could be a Pride comic book. It could be completely Pride where I have no association with this whatsoever. I check all the positive boxes for the most part. Mostly white, you know what I'm saying? Cis, that's a thing now, instead of just straight. White-ish for the most part. Male, tall, whatever. You know what I'm saying? All the good stuff going for me. You know what I'm saying? I don't relate to minorities as much as the casual viewer might imagine. You know what I'm saying? My kids, my wife might enjoy that, right? But I'm just not going to relate to stuff like that. But if it's good storytelling, as I've shown in the past, I will read the hell out of it. You know what I'm saying? I can't identify with a black king in Africa, and yet I absolutely love the idea of it. More powerful than my, comic book hero, Captain America, and I'm there for it. You know what I'm saying? I'm 100% there for it. Loves me some Black Panther stories, even though I can't relate to it. You can give me whatever kind of story you want, as long as you make it good, as long as it's something I can relate to. Kieran Gillen isn't capable of doing that in this for some reason. Because here's the Eternals, characters who I know their original history, I know some of the continuing history of these characters, who they're just not doing it for me. When Jason Aaron touched them, I knew they were going to be ruined even worse, But even now, Kieran Gillen doing his Eternals, I read the first 2. I think I started reading the 3rd issue, and I couldn't even finish it. Whatever, accuse me of whatever you want. I think I only did a review for the first issue, I don't remember, but I just remember it was horrible. I just couldn't for the life of me get through it. I just couldn't relate to these characters in any way, and the story just wasn't good. Plot was fantastic. Story, severely lacking. I hate when that happens. I genuinely hate when something like that happens. I'm sitting here reading this comic book, man. And I know what the story of the updated stories of what the Eternals are supposed to be. You're Eternal, but you have a mission to accomplish. What's that mission? Well, it's not entirely clear. And it was convoluted even more by the people who don't know about the Eternals, except by watching that, with all due respect, kind of booty movie. Kind of a booty movie. It was not, like, nobody enjoyed it for the most part. And no Marvel fans enjoyed it. No MCU fans enjoyed it. You know what I'm saying? The movie buffs who are going to do reviews, they liked it. But even then, you look on Rotten Tomatoes, it was worse than Captain Marvel. My God, just look at the toy sales. You'll still see Captain Marvel toys on certain Toys R Us shelves. Yes, Toys R Us still exists up here in Canada. You'll still see them on the shelves in Walmarts or Winners or whatever stores you have in whatever country. You'll still see Captain Marvel toys every so often. It's a shame. It's not the fault of the toy line. There are army builders in there, and they're so cheap. Why wouldn't you want to build an army of Skrull and Kree? You know what I'm saying? Why wouldn't you? Right? And yet, they still just can't sell these toys. There's just so many. They're dust collectors. They're rack holders. You know, they're holding the rack rather than the rack holding them at this point. And yet, some way, somehow, the Eternals toys were even worse. I have never seen Walmart consistently sell an entire wave of Marvel toys, especially based off of a movie, for more than half off. These things were on sale for $15 in Walmarts up here in Canada, where the prices are higher. They would have been $10 in the States. You go to a place like, where was it that I saw it on sale for $5? Oh, GameStop, the EB Games up here, whatever, the version of GameStop up here, EB Games. We have some GameStops, but they're mostly EB Games. The same owners, from my understanding, though. On sale for the special Friday Spectacular thing for $5. That's unheard of. For an entire wave, not just one or two figures that they're trying to get rid of. It's like, oh, nobody wanted this figure in this wave. This was the throwaway one. Whatever. Dude, an entire wave for $5. You have to acknowledge at some point, the Eternals are simply not a seller. They're not a selling point. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to make fetch happen. I think that was the term from Mean Girls, right? Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to make the Eternals happen. It's not going to happen. At this point, the Eternals are dead. The Eternals are just, at this point, stop. But no, Marvel is still going to try and capitalize off of this, and they've got until November. They're going to tie up the Avengers books, and they're going to tie up all of the X-Men books. Marvel, this is what Marvel has just done to me. Marvel has decided that they want to take their most popular line of comic books and make them unreadable. And I'm not sitting here blaming bad storytelling or bad writing, even though I do have some issues with Kieran Gillen's writing. I don't have any problem with their storytelling. I don't have any problem whatsoever with the art in this book. No, what I have a problem with is the fact that the Eternals simply cannot be made to be popular. Understand, if you're shouting at the screen right now saying, Bill, dude, shut up. I love the Eternals. Understand that you are the exception, not the rule. I used to think that the Eternals were just slightly above tolerable. I thought it's a hidden gem. It's one of those things like, if you come to find out that, this movie was actually originally a comic book, like Cowboys and Aliens was originally a comic book. You know what I'm saying? The Walking Dead, if you come to find out that was actually a comic book, and it was a really cool comic book, It's one of those things where you go back and you read, but you don't try and start it. Do we really want to see Michonne and Rick Grimes and all these other characters redone in a new comic book based off of where the TV series has gone? I mean, is that really what was? Because I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a reimagining of Negan. It's like, just like I don't want to see a reimagining of the Eternals. Neil Gaiman, for crying out loud, jumped on the Eternals. Didn't Alan Moore jump on the Eternals too? We're talking about two of the greatest storytellers that have ever existed, not just in comic books, beyond the shadow of a doubt in comic books, but even in regular novellas and novels and big screen and stuff like that. I'm sorry, who trumps Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore? Right? And I can't remember if Alan Moore actually jumped on the Eternals at one point or another, but I know for a fact that Neil Gaiman has. And he couldn't revitalize these guys. I'm sorry. At some point, recognize that you've got a bum project. It would be great if I could just say, oh, wow, the Eternals, those original, was it 8 or 12 issues? I think it was 12 issues. Only the first 8 were actually like really popular at the time. Then even back then, people were falling off of them, right? I think it was like 12 issues, something like that, whatever it was. Jack Kirby, I'm sorry, you're one of the greatest, you're a founder of comic book art, and yet, sorry, Jack, your storytelling is simply not great. It's just not, or at least your writing. Like, Jack just didn't have the ability, as much as I love Jack and I venerate him for what he's done, he's simply not great at his storytelling. Without Stan Lee there, Jack Kirby is just really cool lines that we'll never understand because there's no story there. The New Gods was canceled. The Eternals were canceled. Sandman, his version of Sandman was canceled. You name it, his demon, Etrigan, other people made that popular. It was a great idea, but that was canceled. And that was probably the most successful of the things he did. Does anybody remember his Manhunter? How about his Green Arrow run, right? One of the greatest artists, unquestionably. Even if you don't like his art, you'd have to be a fool to not acknowledge. If Marvel based all of their storytelling around his art and made him the model of what Marvel is, was, and will ever be, you're missing the script. You're missing the plot. Right? Jack Kirby cannot be denied as being one of the most influential, probably the most influential person in all of comics. I know that Stan Lee is the face of it, but nobody can deny that Jack Kirby is the most important person in comic books. It'd be very hard. You could try, but you know that we've got an argument. You know that I've got a strong argument for Kirby being the most important figure in comics. That being said, there's a reason why Stan Lee was so crucial to back then, because nobody was going to tell those stories the way that Lee did. And that's just facts. And when Marvel said, sure, Jack, you want to come back and you want to finish the New Gods story that DC canceled? Well, you know you can't use those gods, but you can't use those characters at all, but you can finish your story here by all means. And it was the New Gods, the Eternals, and they simply didn't sell either. And he finished his story, and they weren't good. It simply wasn't good. And he was bitter over it, and life sucks. You know what I'm saying? Life just sucks. But that's the story, and it's a shame. The Eternals are not going to sell. Kieran Gillen is not going to save the Eternals. The people have spoken. And now what you've just done, what Marvel has just done, is they've allowed the best chance that they have for an incredible, for their comic book. Wow, that was fun. The X-Men are the number one sellers that Marvel has outside of Spider-Man. The only way they could have made this worse if they would have said, oh, also Spider-Man is going to be involved in this, so all of his books are going to be tied in. Marvel Comics would go bankrupt. If it wasn't for the MCU, I'm saying the comics, not the MCU, not the Marvel Entertainment franchise, not Disney, who owns them all. I'm saying they would actually file Chapter 11 for Marvel Comics, that division under the larger Disney umbrella. They would actually have to file Chapter 11 to recoup any kind of money that they would inevitably, undoubtedly lose. This is horrible. And honestly, I look at this and I see you're going to start tying up, of all things, the X-Men comic books. So every story that I read from the X-Men until November is going to involve the Eternals. You just told me that you won't want me to spend my money. on your product, on your best-selling product. I see that as a travesty. I see that as one of those things where your friend loses his mind and puts all his money into Bitcoin and loses it all. Like, it's not a good investment. The Eternals are simply not a good investment. A movie that you didn't even have to. You know that Disney declared that the original Ant-Man movie was a disaster for them. They considered it a failure because it didn't make nearly as much as their Iron Man, Captain America, Avengers, the Thor, right? All of those movies that they were doing, the Hulk, right? They weren't able to make Ant-Man the movie as successful as those other movies that they'd done, so they considered it a financial loss. Even though they made money on it, it wasn't as lucrative as the other products they'd done before Ant-Man. So they considered it to be a loss. What do you think they consider the Eternals? Because they seem to be pretty quiet on it. I know what they should consider the Eternals. That alone, with the MCU being the most sought-after franchise in the modern world right now, and they went and trusted some artsy person to try and get a new look on things, and they had Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek and people from all over the world. This was the most diverse movie I think that's ever been made ever. You know what I'm saying? All these famous people so that people from all over the world could say, I would like to see this movie, and yet it was still a ruin. And you could blame COVID until you're blue in the face. This right here is a picture of me, not caring, because at some point excuses become bankrupt. Just like the income source of this movie. I don't even think they tried to charge extra for. Remember when they did that with Black Widow? And they did it with Shang-Chi. They made a horrible movie because they're horrible characters. And no matter what you try to do with these characters, it's going to suck. Because how you fit them into the greater Marvel universe, nobody cares. They're not the new Avengers. Nobody wants to see this. People were scared because with Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, they were thinking they were going to make her an Eternal. God, I'm so glad that she was a Jinn. Because that doesn't make any sense, according to the way that, it was originally written by G. Willow Wilson or thought up by Sana Amanat. It was never conceptualized that she was a Jinn. And why wouldn't you make it Arabs who are, more associated with the Jinn than the Pakistanis? Like, you're using the Muslim religion, Islam, as opposed to the Arab culture, but you're bringing it over here to Pakistan instead. Like, it's weird. God, there's so many, to me, really bad decisions. But Ms. Marvel was so endearing, so wonderful that I still enjoyed Ms. Marvel. There's my review for the final episode of Ms. Marvel. I think that it was grand. I think that it was beautiful. My kids loved it. My wife was smiling all throughout it. I'm a grown-ass 47-year-old man who sat there looking at this kids movie, and I'm like, I am really happy that they made this because it makes the people in my family happy. They changed who the character is. Those are very reasonable gripes. But nonetheless, if you don't know who this character is, you're still going to like her. You're still going to like her a lot. And I'm okay with the changes they made to her powers and her origins and all that stuff. I'm okay with it. The biggest fear that us comic book fans had, though, was that they were going to say, oh, they don't like the Inhumans, so they're not going to make her an Inhuman like she actually is in the comics. No, they're going to make her an Eternal. And that's going to be bad because it's going to associate her with that movie. And there's nothing positive about the Eternals. Man, that is genuinely heartbreaking. And now you've just, while this clogged toilet, while somebody keeps on flushing this extremely clogged toilet of the Eternals, now you've just decided, instead of running a snake through it or trying to at least plunge it, or God forbid, for crying out loud, at least try and use some Drano in the damn thing, right? No. Instead, they start stuffing X-Men comic books down that freaking giant toilet also, making this into a septic tank for all of Marvel. What an absolutely horrible idea this was. My peeps, this is heartbreaking. I'm sad that they're going to do, as if the Eternals comic wasn't example enough that it's not going to happen, or the movie, or all this stuff. You decide to make a comic book that couldn't even rank in the top 50 into a storyline, an event that is going to cover the Avengers and the X-Men. What is there left for me to read? What is there left for you to read? Anything that you were enjoying with X-Men Red or Immortal X-Men and all that stuff, I hope that you enjoyed it, because it's about to get a whole lot worse, and you know I'm not wrong. Horrible. The idea of trying to wipe, of the Eternals, a pocket of them at least, trying to wipe out all the mutants on the planet, because they've made it to Mars, therefore they've obviously gotten out of control, and they're a deviant gene, they're based off of the deviants. That should be an amazing storyline, and yet somehow it wasn't able to really be captured here. And therefore, who is going to care about anything that involves the Eternals? Genuinely heartbreaking. When you have this much love for the Marvel Universe, when you have this much love for the principle of what the Marvel Universe has, at least in the past, always upheld. And we're finally seeing something that's not, that doesn't seem to be enveloped around the idea of identity politics or something like that, where they're just trying to do storytelling. I'm sure this is going to be one of the big sellers because X-Men is attached to it. And if you just look at the idea that this is an event, and events usually sell really well in Marvel, if you ignore the fact, take into account, don't ignore it, take into effect how much this is, ranked, at least in the beginning, and the final issue, I'm sure, because people are going to want to know how it ends. But take into account the current sales of all the X-Men titles and the Avengers titles, but specifically the X-Men, and then see where they're ranked as the months go by until November, where those storylines are finally finished. There'll be some epilogue stuff, I imagine, and then by the new year, we should have all new stories, all new comics for the X-Men and stuff like that, and who knows what'll happen. You got to look at the sales of all of the books involved in this event, not just the event books themselves. Guys, I'm going to wrap this up right now. This was a pretty long one. In fact, how long am I going? Oh my God, 43 minutes. Jeez, that's crazy. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Love and peace, and like the video, watch an ad. Talk to you guys later. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.